the exposure side of disease is a big one. Yeah, I tried to characterize this already by illustrating how genetic is a solid part of disease, but it is definitely only a small part. And there's a lot left for all of the exposures, especially if you include also the infectious components, which some people include in the exposome, others don't. Yeah? But it is really important to understand that there is something big which we don't have under control.
Welcome to The Global Lens, Science Diplomacy in Focus. A podcast exploring how science, technology, and strategic partnerships are shaping our world and the diplomacy that brings them together. Now, here is your host, Daniella Sussman.
This episode of The Global Lens, Science Diplomacy in Focus is brought to you by Global Signals, a bi-weekly newsletter for globally minded leaders. Each issue delivers early insights into science, innovation, and diplomacy, covering AI, quantum, biotech, space, and health. You'll find emerging signals, international partnership opportunities, and clear takeaways to stay ahead of what's next across the innovation ecosystem and global diplomacy. Subscribe today through the link in the episode description.
Imagine the air you breathe, the water you drink, even the stress of your daily commute silently shaping your health. Scientists call this the exposome, the mix of chemicals, particles, microbes, and stressors we encounter daily, driving up to 80% of chronic diseases. Yet the public health still relies on century-old animal testing and fragmented rules. In 2025, over 400 leaders from 30 countries signed a declaration on the Human Exposome in Washington, D.C., launching the Human Exposome Project on par with the Human Genome Project to map exposures and guide policy for all stakeholders. Private investment is accelerating. Venture capital is flowing into artificial intelligence tools and organ-on-chip devices, miniature organs that predict toxicity in days. Analysts expect the field to grow from about 400 million in 2025 to 1.5 billion by 2030 as regulators and pharmaceutical companies seek faster, animal-free data. Science, diplomacy, and market pressure are converging. Yet coordination remains limited as governments, scientists, health ministries, and investors navigate this space. Without alignment, we risk incompatible data sets and policy whiplash, just as AI is rewriting toxicology at a rapid pace. To explore what comes next, I'm joined by Dr. Thomas Hartung, Professor of Evidence-Based Toxicology at Johns Hopkins University, former head of toxicology at the European Commission's Joint Research Center, long-term advisor to U.S. agencies like the EPA and NIH, and architect of the Exposome Moonshot Forum. Thomas, welcome to the Global Lens.
Thanks for having me.
What is the exposome and why should policymakers care?
Yeah, I mean, the exposome was 20 years ago a wild idea by Chris Wild, suiting name. He was at the time head of the Cancer Center, the International Agency for Research on Cancer in Lyon. And he said, we should consider the totality of everything people are exposed to. And at the time, people were largely smiling, yeah, good luck if you think the thousands of chemicals we are exposed to and all these changing patterns. But the last 20 years have proven him right. There's more and more data, there's more and more knowledge. Not that we would be able to measure for any given individual everything, but we can measure more and more for more and more people. Yeah.
So what do you think has shifted from 2022? I know you organized a workshop and it was of interest to the Department of Defense and later the 2025 Exposome Moonshot Forum at Johns Hopkins University, which really brought a large international participation from around the globe. What signaled this momentum, in your opinion?
I mean, we have a pretty strong dominance of the human genome over the last 40 years. I mean, this has really changed how we do biomedical research and how we do medicine. But after these 40 years and having more and more instruments, we understand that a maximum of 5% of the diseases is really genetic. About 40% have a genetic component, but especially the really worrying, expensive chronic diseases, they were very often driven by other things. The genetic components are not that strong. And people have estimated that there is 80-90% of diseases who have a genetic an exposure component. So something in your lifestyle, some things you have encountered can be impacting. So you can either say, difficult to assess this, or simply try what can we do and expand this and build up what we call the human exposome. And we were interested to see whether we can possibly map existing knowledge, technologies, projects, and see whether there is appetite on a global scale to do a similar decade-long, multi-billion effort to map the exposure side of disease. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity. And in my field, toxicology, I think it is possibly moving really the discussion from the art of poisoning rats, which is pretty useless as we learn more and more to really find out about what chemicals do to us, to the exposure side of disease.
You mentioned the Human Genome Project, and obviously that's a parallel that I've heard. In your opinion, which governance tools translate well when it comes to exposome? Obviously, we're in an era of artificial intelligence, and I'm just curious to get your perspective on that.
I mean, this is actually, from my point of view, the big enabling technology. If you want to assess the exposure of people to a reasonable number of chemicals and a larger group of people with all the multitude of diseases, that's a lot of data crunching. We have the technologies to get this information, but to make sense of it is only becoming available with AI. Because AI shines when you have a ton of different data, much more than any human being can digest. But then to find patterns, to find something which is not statistically significant, but which is a non-random type of connection between certain substances or patterns of substances showing in connection with certain diseases. And that's exactly what we want to deploy.
It's very interesting because you also briefed the European Parliament in June 2025, earlier this year, and you'll be testifying before the US Congress in September. What reactions have you seen so far, and what do you hope lawmakers will take away?
I think there's a lot of fascination. Artificial intelligence is at the moment the big door opener for almost everything, yeah, because I think everybody understands this is a technological revolution, and if you don't embrace it, you will likely suffer from this. I often say AI will only replace toxicologists who don't use it, and you can say so for any type of profession. It is really critical to understand that these new tools, as problematic as they are on their own, they are offering certain opportunities, and this is one of them, where we are overwhelmed with analyzing the data, and where AI can help us to at least suggest connections. It will then still be humans to decide and explore, is this a good connection? Is it something which is actionable, something we can use, or is it something where the AI was perhaps misled by certain patterns, biases in the data sets and the data gaps it had to fill? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, looking at artificial intelligence and organ-on-chip platforms, they're advancing so fast. And obviously, regulators have to validate those tools without slowing innovation. And you kind of touched on that. In your opinion, how can this move forward?
Yeah, it is difficult. It's a big challenge. Yeah. I mean, from my personal experience, I have seen things from both sides, having worked for the European Commission in scientific policy support. This is a technology which is impacting on all aspects of our life. And it is changing faster than anything we have ever seen. You have to imagine, since deep learning was introduced around 2010, these technologies are doubling in capacity every 3 months. So this year's AI is about 8 times more powerful than last year's. Yeah. Or in other words, I started around 2013 to develop an AI program in my group, because I was fortunate that 2 students with machine learning backgrounds joined my team as PhD students, and they're actually until today as junior faculty involved with us. Yeah. So since 2013, AI has increased more than 1 billion-fold with respect to its capacity. And you only have to see yesterday's release of ChatGPT-5 is again a big step forward. And now these systems, as Sam Altman said, are no longer answering at the quality of a PhD student, but they're answering at the level of an academic with a PhD in their field of expertise. Yeah. And that's simply crazy.
It's incredible. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, obviously, private capital is surging into exposome tech. Technology is moving so fast. And in your opinion, what are some of the incentives that are moving these companies at the moment?
I mean, it is really a new engine, which was developed. It is driving an entire technological revolution. And all the things for which we did not have proper solutions so far, they're exploring this. Yeah? And the exposure side of disease is a big one. Yeah? I tried to characterize this already by illustrating how genetic is a solid part of disease, but it is definitely only a small part. And there's a lot left for all of the exposures, especially if you include also the infectious components, which some people include in the exposome, others don't. Yeah? But it is really important to understand that there is something big which we don't have under control. And if you see that trillions are spent every year on chronic diseases, on neurodegenerative diseases, on rheumatoid arthritis and others. These are diseases which are really heavily depending on progress for developing new strategies for counteracting these mechanisms. I'm particularly interested in autism. So what is happening that the numbers of children with autism have tripled over the last 2 decades in the US. Yeah, and I'm only using the last 2 decades because that's the time where we already had established the same diagnostic tools. The awareness was high. So it is not that we can say, yeah, we just called these children a bit odd. It is something which is actually increasing, dramatically increasing. And this increase has to be explained. It cannot be genetics because genetics is not changing that fast. It has to be lifestyle factors, and there's a big possibility that chemicals are involved. It is unlikely that it's a ton of chemicals, but you have to imagine we are bringing about 1,000 new chemicals to the US market per year. Yeah? 1,000. That's the number of pre-marketing notifications the EPA receives. So there's at the moment no way of saying, oh, this one is safe, because we're not even testing them for this possibility. We have also certain cancers which are continuing, and we would love to know, is this chemical, the new one or the old one, contributing to this? But only if you go a little bit closer into the quality of the current tools, you understand we need something new. Let's take the cancer example. Yeah? This is certainly one of the biggest concerns consumers have. Is something, let's say a food additive, a food colorant or something, yeah, is this bad for me? Most of the things have never been tested. Of about 350,000 chemicals which have been registered for commerce, about 3,500 have been tested. Yeah? That's the relation. And the reason for this is it does cost you about $1 million to do the test on rats. Yeah. These rats predict mice cancer. So the very same test done in mice instead of rats by about 57%. Yeah. There's no reason to assume that they predict humans any better. It also, besides costing $1 million, it takes you 5 years until you have the result. Most products are no longer on the market after 5 years, yeah, and nobody wants to hold developments by 5 years. And it also takes about 10 kilograms of this chemical to feed 400 rats for 2 years of their life. Tell a chemist to produce 10 kilograms of a chemical which is not yet in production. If you know these Erlenmeyer flasks and these type of setups, they're good for producing gram quantities, but not kilogram quantities of these things. Yeah. So there's a good reason why the animal tests only go so far. They have made the world a safer place, but they're no longer really adequate to our current needs, the fast development cycles, the quick introduction of new chemistry. And for this reason, we need faster methods, and we need methods which are relevant for humans, not for rats. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, we had a discussion earlier and you talked about the ethical aspect, when it comes to animal welfare, but also looking at the market and how fast technology is moving. What economic or reliability arguments finally do you think has, given the regulators the reason to move towards non-animal methods?
It is really, first of all, about the human relevance. It is about the decision-taking, which has to be fast. If you take a drug, drug development takes about 12 years, which means that the company has about 8 years of patent time left to bring in the money, and they invest on average $2.4 billion. And so 1 day earlier to the market or 1 day later is about worth $1 million. Just to bring in the money again without any profit rates. Yeah. So for this reason, it is extremely important for these companies to have things they can rely on and can take these decisions to either further or not a certain chemical and bring it to clinical trials. And this is a very, very important value proposition. In other areas where it is more about public health and protection, it's just the same thing. Can you tell a company to take a chemical out of products because you have some indications from animal tests? Some chemicals are found in 50,000 different products. Yeah, I mean, most of them in thousands, but still, you know what it means to replace them in many products. That's an enormous costly decision, and this is why many companies say, "Show me really that is relevant. Can I make an argument that I don't have to take this very, very costly decision and change all of my production towards something else?" So there's better tools are really important on both sides, the regulatory side and the regulated industries. Yeah.
So, Thomas, many of our listeners are science attachés at embassies. They're obviously policymakers. What, 3 concrete actions can they take in the next 12 months to advance exposome collaboration?
The overwhelming message was from our Moonshot Forum, which we organized in Washington and which was bringing together 300 invited people. It was by invitation only. And it brought together not just the scientists. The scientists are always easy to get, and they will always say, yeah, there's a big opportunity and give us a few million and we will advance this. They have always their hands open for the next request. We brought in the civil society. We brought in policymakers. To throw out a few names, we had Sir Jeremy Farrar, at the time the chief scientist of the WHO. The day later, he was promoted to Deputy Director General. Or we had people like Sir Peter Gluckman for the International Science Council, or Rémi Quirion for the president of the International Network of Science Government Advisors. So this is was really a great crowd. Yeah, this is just a few examples, but overwhelming momentum was there. This is an opportunity for an international science project, and especially in times where science is challenged often and where global projects are rare. I think the perspective of working together and developing governance, interoperability, because at least both sides of the Atlantic, but I think you can say in the meantime, globally, there is an appetite and interest to understand more systematically these influential factors. But we're not talking the same language. And especially for making use of AI, we need some rules. Yeah, how do we report on this? It is about data sharing, but data sharing is not enough. You have also to share, for example, the metadata, which means how were these data produced? And this is something which we only start to understand, that we need to get reporting standards, that we need to publish open access. AI shows us in a very impressive way that all the knowledge which is not open access is not part of the common knowledge anymore. So this outdated model of the big publishers of taking a ton of money before you can read the article, which was paid with taxpayers' money, is not working anymore. Because AI, as the big integrator of all of this knowledge, cannot read it. You have to imagine that in the life sciences at the moment, 3.4 million papers are produced every year. And the large majority of them is not accessible to AI. That's a waste of money, because we will in the future, with more and more reliance on AI, help me to find the relevant stuff, to integrate the relevant information, we will see that these papers are simply excluded. And here is a first thing policymakers can do. The European Union went ahead. Every research which is funded by European money has to be open access published. Yeah. This is something we are still lacking, though there's more and more encouragement to do so, we have to say. Yeah. And I think we also need to see that there is really, we need signals. We need signals from the different policy areas, but also economic areas and the regulators, that they are welcoming something like this. This has a lighthouse function for their own people, because sometimes it is also the people in the agencies. I don't have the most recent numbers, but the EPA used to be a 14,000 people agency, the FDA a 19,000 people agency. It takes a long time until the last person, desk officer, is actually understanding that a new time has come and something new has to be applied. And you cannot do business as usual anymore. So it is a very important signal to tell, yes, we want it differently. And I'm really thrilled that at the moment, NIH, FDA, and EPA are very much going in this very direction. Yeah. But then it's also the signal to the regulated industry. These type of data are welcome. Yeah, we want to see them, because very often these companies already use new methodologies to take internal decisions on what to put their money and what to develop and what not to develop. But then they register their substances with the old stuff. Yeah, they just check the boxes and say, that's what FDA, EPA want to see. So it's an important signal to say, yes, we want to embrace new technologies. And that's then the signal for academia and biotech companies to actually provide these new methods, to redirect their developments and believe in the market opportunity which is coming there. And this is why I think it's exciting times that AI is so fast. You say you either ride the wave or you will be drawn and die, washed away. And I think more and more people are understanding this. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think you really touched on a lot of points. And I'm wondering, just from your opinion, what would be like one milestone that would mark success for the Exposome Moonshot? Obviously, we have the technology moving fast. You were talking about harmonizing data, access, and so on. What would be one milestone that would mark success?
I think we need to start a discussion between the different sides, the funding bodies, to say, can we agree on this goal? And can we start setting up a roadmap for doing so? Because we see that at the moment, with some hesitation, things are taking place both in the US and in Europe. Europe is actually a little bit advanced. Yeah, they have more networks already running. But the NIH, on occasion of the Moonshot Forum, for example, announced a real-world data initiative where they said, the human exposome is mandatory, yeah, to make sense out of all of these things. Yeah, so they really want to invest, but I think it's now also important to get in the regulatory side, the EPA and NIH and FDA type of organizations, and certainly the FDA is the most important of all of them. They're not a funding body, so I would not expect them to fund the human exposome. But making clear that it is in line with their interest in a mechanistic understanding of disease, a mechanistic understanding of the drug targets and how to correct the derailed metabolism, that this is something. And I say the FDA, I call them out because we are in the US 4% of the world population. But we are 53% of the drug market, and we are 67% of the drug market under patent. So 60% of the money spent on patented drugs, so the modern new stuff, is spent in the US. And this is why every company in the world is only looking for what does the FDA want. And this is why things like the FDA Modernization Act were so important, or why now their stance on new approaches on the human exposome will be critical for as a signal for the industries, both those who produce new stuff or those who produce the technologies to develop these new things.
It's mind-blowing. I sense positive, obviously, movements, developments, but we still have some ways to go. And I feel like everything is moving so fast. So, Thomas, looking, obviously our conversation will continue, but after today's interview, if a foundation, industry leader, company, or government, they want to engage with you, where should they plug in?
I mean, we are trying to, with our center, to be an honest broker. Yeah. So we are not a relevant executor of exposome research. So we are not, it's not our interest to say, give us millions that we can burn it in our laboratories. Yeah, we are trying really to be at the interface between research, for which we have a deep understanding of these technologies of AI, as well as the human relevant cell systems. And we are trying to now continue from the Moonshot. We have created now the Global Exposome Forum series. We will have the next meeting already in April in Barcelona. We also have presence at the World Science Forum in South Africa in November, and at the World Science Journalist Forum in South Africa adjacent to it. So we are building now out dissemination strategies, and this is building at the moment working groups, global working groups, and an infrastructure. And we hope to raise funds, because at the moment it's a pure grassroots meeting or activity initiative, because we don't have the money to invite anyone. Yeah, we just can say, if you're interested, come over. We are throwing a party here, as we did in Washington, and we were thrilled that 300 people essentially came on their own dime. Yeah, none of them invited, and engaged for 3.5 days in a very, very good discussion on where are we, where can we go, and how do we make this a program.
I had the opportunity to be there as well, and I witnessed firsthand the engagement, and especially from all stakeholders, the private sector, government, and scientists. It was really, really inspiring. Thomas, you're coming to an end soon. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audiences today, or would you like to add?
Yeah, I would say we have a very interesting time with transformative technologies, disruptive technologies. And they are changing the way we can develop things which are important to each and everyone. As you said in the beginning, I'm a toxicologist, so I'm looking into the bad side of chemicals and drugs. The methods we are using at the moment have been developed when I was still in kindergarten or not yet born. So imagine this, yeah, there's no other area of science. So it's a really exciting moment at the time. And it is exactly opposite to everything we are seeing at the moment. It is a big investment into public health, preventing disease instead of curing disease. It is global in nature. It has the possibility for us work together, and not even just Europe and the US, but it's also the global South, because that's where the people are really suffering from exposures to an extent we fortunately don't have anymore. But these are the test cases the test beds where we can start understanding what is happening and come up very quickly with solutions as a whole.
On that note, Thomas, I want to say thank you very much for joining us today. It was a really pleasure speaking with you. I hope our conversation will continue. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Stay with us for more conversations that put science diplomacy in focus. If you enjoyed the episode, please follow, rate, and share. Until next time. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to The Global Lens, Science Diplomacy in Focus. To hear more conversations at the intersection of science, policy, and international partnerships, subscribe to The Global Lens on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and over 30 platforms around the globe. Send us your ideas and guest suggestions to Daniella@globallenspodcast.com.